say was them were Susa, okay, be Achena until Oko hunger strike. MPP near the option Emma Meda, but
this house approves contracts and say we should pay a contractor $29 million as mobilization.
Arushia mamu akwaba ebiem emra juma de yosia sanso fanasia ensema ekoso ewo oman Ghana mu yene ni nyina ebre ayefo road minister a expose na nado dan Kufuado ene MPP aban amasisia me no kasei ensem bebre ene frache eba eno dan nchen a Felix Ofosu kwache adinkomo miracles aboaje nso asieje adinkomo eno achi no ensem bebre nso ene firi ho ba quick one yeba buru so na fe no ya enkomo a akaso baransa na no yenko tie nkomo yi emra NDC member baako wadi nkomo recruitment a ekoso a manfo se ayansa muntaka mubarak NDC aban NDC for nankasa wo ma neglect wo mo nanso enkomo bre any information bre ena wonsem ye che quick one yeni kantie we mra se papa no our point anase oni point e koba abusha information wa chipa.
Hello.
Udi wu hiame wo kasa fe he.
Hello, good morning. Me kasafi Swedru.
We ba to adaruma wan kasa no to forms na anase wo ma.
Me man the to forms no, me ma 4 and the to forms no. Omoto army, police, prison and a fire.
Okay, boy amane o ma pass ya.
You near Tiane say, me na me wo ye kan sen Savannah na maba Swedru. Nti me ko special vote ni bi me ko ene na esi midin nim. Nti na I have to wait. Esan say na me so me free baby na aba ni nti no na me hu sika nyina asa. E na me frɛ women organizer owo adansi asokwa Ketiamon constituency me frɛ no. Nti me frɛ na no ka kyerem so minya botre na sika won hu so na ofrɛ constituency no chairman. Say me no ka say ya na waye mumu me yire e na me ma 4 ni efi ha no ko Kufuado ekoto aba no nyame nko a yedu kuro bi de akwadum na timbaka a ohia e no ne tire pai nyame nko a se ye ndraba na amane amfa kwa mu a nkokun me ne family ni nyina wo hye me ma 4 ene me yire ne me nipa 6 nko hye nyina ase na me ma akwa akoto form me ba boy ba ko onu kra de onu wie UCC onya 3.2 e ka me fan 7.4 na nka onya first class apa Okotra Armed Forces opasiye omudu baby you see a friend leaderless test na yeyi ni free mu no osanto police so police ni say aptitude test disqualified na obi a ono no wako UCC a okita 3.2 anke ka just 0.4 na nka we tini anya first class yetimi disqualify na sa amani yeyi se wo shedem wo susa wo ka bibia kire na onti wo hunger strike o ma na aduane a since Monday o ma na aduane a wondi wo susa wo shedem nti masa asem na aba no de ani edin yesrem a mo hwe na mo kan bi mae na ani edin emu oya esi den na AI etimi feli obi why na certain questions no AI na certain questions no ono amaki ye wa mrekwa ye hu nipa no pass mark a wonyae se minya si ana minya e ana minya bi eno ane se ba ye se disqualify
enti mitie o kasa mu di anja se mu ya NDC for
me na me ka kire wo but me yimi hu adi se wati ase me yimi hu adi because of baby me adwuma nti ni yimi hu adi me yiri say baby ano wo I have to convince her ansa no ba be join ye otimasi enti say no me momu de MPP nye the option Emma Meda but say omumu bia nya em say ye be make sure so bia ntu ne hofo
enti 2028 won to
oh I know the matter time ni drew on when we get to the river we shall cross it
enti dia akobai ayawo ya pa
papa na ne me ya kese kura ne se me mafo no tu kura de omo se omo no omo mpebiom tu na aka no ba ko de suan no osu suan no ba ko kura nya enkwala fo ba ko kura nya UCC ni de wasusa na maka kire ne se ya uni mi ubenya nti no ne wonya abotre wo nkwa wo ade but still me ka bibia wonfa sese ye kwa adwuma wo se eja ba ko ofie because ye nim ni obetimi aye na ho.
Okay, Commander.
Yeah, director.
And then Commander Dawson, but I'm son no. And some of Papa at the up to the quick one. Young man, Papa no o case. And I say only case.
Oh, director, Papa no only case.
Aren't
we're making the point. But then tia only case no. But the reasons in the also. But number one, any person and the two Obama president mama.
Oh, sir, I think John Mama Onya 57%.
Yeah, about 6 million votes. Yeah. And what say nipa 6 million. Obia what to abide bibiano on average most of ye to ban ye youth.
Yeah.
Dia wa ba kokra when you need to say papa no. Ono nso wa ba oye youth. O nua keto wo fase nti automatically omo to abade ye benya nipa 6 million. Nti obia nso so pese ni nipa ko adwuma no bi. Ebe da yi.
Na okra de wanya se ye ma sika na ade koto aba no. Obi wa wanya sika wode oman ne wodo. Ene wo so to aba ma Jomama.
You see?
Jomama ba ye no so no. Ai enema nye 100% a tie ka se enema dana kwama enema ekoyie na chote
because
etie no kwa papa wanya so mfaso
enne ya yekese papa ya wokese se okoto mo a the price na otono under na nado no enye sa price no otono ni ye nka se ni bofu aban nti ye de man different price but enye sa ne ye no papa ni ntie se otu abama NDC no enkyere se Oman state resources no e was yede to wo nsam na wo kire de wo ba be ye
edi se oba no sa aptitude test no edi kakra eni se ukọ exams na anya so we invest in no na exams no automatically wa pass o
director ade ba ko no se ye wade bi a general knowledge enti wo apply common sense na wo director obayem se bi a program be no ye university director e bi a any link with ade a ye kan ho with security issues any general issues no emfa ho ba bia na wo ba no onye intellectual onye too smart and say wo ko na wo failure on tiase say obaye graduate na wo fail
me wo video na me ko comment section ma so obi akọ comment say na wo 3.2 and na wo be gina akeka we obi so no wanya 3.8 enso kwade no wa tro one pass
right winim say the last time ye din common and how tell so unia ba kom that there were questions bia menene nso di nkomo personal a general knowledge say o you obi a follow eniame wa bontia you will not know this right enne ye ni say koko every Fernando Po ne ba Ghana obi a university right onye historian busane say Fernando Po enne e current on my bank obeda nti say papa no udwie na wo bana ko answer this question wetin na mo betina fia enka ntre ye say obana ko hunger strike enu nti no ene ewiase mra na wiye
enye se oto obama NDC ti na on qualify no obi qualify a yemfa wa on qualify no na ni oman ye cheche ni say
right winim
na Jomama se oye reset when nyina kan reset no
of course
enye party members ne de omo ba ya adwuma at the end no Jomama aye party members wait to abama me na 2028 party free power ebe ye ode
right winim
enye sa na MPP ye no omo tie che no
me be ma scenarios bi a kire say san krofo we mu bi no say bi omo nyini papa and the sanadwe ye ne say wa to abama NDC enti automatically NDC for mfa ne madwuma ye nya side because ordinary fu enenam but under NPP administration aya was so west ogon by election and na koba say abaye koto ya manfo ko botuo national security for kokun amanfo ho na omo ye NPP boys ene ye fa omo do omo wura adwuma ni and omo ko say because me ya ban nipa but NPP na demapa enti me defend me party recent boko issues na ye kaka entimi nka no na amanfo bi make allegations say security personnel bi wo ho a politicians in the parties and the fa omo di omo koye enti omo koduru ho a instead of ni job wo say okopotent tokwa no na we ja to nchen na oye party sem ho but these are issues are ebokro and we keep on saying say oman ni be ya ye security issues eni say ye politics asem enti me kwa ma say eni power ye in charge and recruitment no and he say interior minister ka ho because interior minister or your politician and yenye politicians in film say your recruitment na aban krofo nka ho asem bi politicians nka ho bi e IGP ne krofo pe
me kwa manya ne ntia se na MPC no even MPP time na nkomo bi kokoso say links ni nyina kwa ko di MPs ne nsem edi se wo ye MP ana betimi di akwada ko de me chawati ase ba jo mama bai no matese sanye man nyina o matwam man je se o mama MP bia ba ko pe ba first na MPs timi di be 10 ko
there is evidence because afanya ma kan parliamentary muntaka wa bra muntaka edi nka ba for say ye be fa memfa ne security personnel so and wo ka say e ma ne nyana adwen say obeyi na free protocol ni on man protocol ni bi nti meaning say we believed and na ye no kren so na ye protocol ni kwa ne koso MPs na acha afa
I abroche for mo e menye sure say US mo ne UK mo ne abroche no obi nko se me kwakoto aba ma Donald Trump se da be ya Donald Trump ba obefa me ba soldier obefa me ba police obefa me ba yi
na Donald Trump offer police
abi
the better ye who said
the pia Donald Trump ba betra konwa no so no be so man ni yi
very simple
na me do mi ya wo beto ye
very simple
economy no niam be koyi
the better man pani adwuma no no enti say ye to aba na enei sa voters we the better ye kan o krentre o mu they should separate themselves say aban ni be ye adwuma yie NDC for better to niam yie na bibia ye free and fair na obi susu say oye NDC ni nti automatically anka yem fa sabi opportunity ni manema o mafo osi ba kokura enyim ti wonti ase oba na ko hunger strike woni yemu bi adwuma yaye but sometimes amanfo bi wo a sabi okotena ba bia na waka ne de okoto aba odi sika party na ma usika e na odi transportation e na odi okoto aba yemu bi wo a ya anyi sika free party ho but ya tena se aye dede over 1 year e de ma political party but ya risk your life obetima na obi dia ba bo trim because oh you against at the end of the day we are not saying say by force aban ma yadwuma nye by force aban fa ye nipa
obi aka bibi
o man aka bibi but say obegina ponti be ka say o ma for enti won to aba bi ma ye ni problem ye to abasa sabi ye ya nyansa for ye adwuma bi enti enei ye ma o man ni say ye rescue o man no at the end of the day en o mu a o ma dwemu no no o mu be free system ni and we know them ashase but onim say aban ye to ye no ye won krofo be ne ka so Ghana fo buafu MPP no enye obi anana ne buafu ye won krofo be ho me ye opportunists o ma dwen kire o mo say abai ko NDC ho enti ye nko join the moving train na ye ntena mu bi na opportunities ya ewo mu no ye nko dibi nti enne onye opportunity ni buafu but ye nya sa ade no sa ade na eba na ya check ko football bo na o mu nyina di party full soldiers na o ma enjoy na o mo kono NCP the same NDC ni NPP wa ban mu na o complain say edrisa ye for police fo a ye miem na NPP for do nkrofo anko akọ ye kwoto ban ye sana na NDC fo ka na enne you party na power na wa party say omu de o madwuma bie omu nyim say de ye oman enti ye miem na obi anya opportunity de o deserve no onko unim number of graduates a omokofa forms ni bi say oba ye graduate na wa nyama accept the fact say obi ye better than oba no unko obi afoma oso nkwa ni kwani very simple as ABCD NDC for mususu say aban ni o man ni on this recruitment no you better ha ka no 1,000 times say aban why very fair to Ghanaians aban ni serve Ghana on serve NDC
quick one ye free ho say dream bi koso awakufu at time wo no mutimi ma contract say ye kwan ni asa to phone zika de beto phone nyesika ketua abusua akufu ado ne nkofo mo ya adwuma o na adwuma no so de adwuma bone nko a yenti road minister me kobo ebedi nkomo.
This house approves even contracts, road contracts, where we write into the contract that we will buy even mobile phone that the contractor will use on the project. We borrow money to buy mobile phones for the contractor on the project. Yes, you say, hey, that is what you have approved. We even pay for the use of the mobile phone approved by this house. Tell me this is not the best forum. This house approves contracts and say we should pay a contractor $29 million as mobilization. And if that contractor fails, if we fail to do certain things, the contractor can walk away free with our $29 million. Tell me this is not the right forum. Let's look at each other. I don't know your constituency, but in my constituency, there will be a pregnant woman today who may be struggling to find a health facility to attend. I have constituents today who are looking for potable water to drink. And if you and I, members of Parliament, write a contract and give away $29 million to a contractor and say that when the contractor raises a net certificate, we are not able to pay, the contractor can walk away with $29 million. Tell me this is not the right forum to be talking about it. What has this got to do with the Auditor General? It is members of Parliament who should do our work diligently. How do you feel buying a mobile phone for a contractor?
Okay, Commander.
Yeah, Director.
Road Minister.
Of course.
And we obviously were exposing another down Kufuado.
Okay.
And then a buy.
Okay.
Now, when you not so.
Director, win. The team come away, no. And say, Asema, the BIA Kayakano, ye agro.
Oh, yeah.
We are not serious about these issues. NPP MPs Nankasano, almost say, they were surprised to say, what me approve contract here, to phones, and they are contractor.
Asemu.
Mankas or man shall contract no.
Oh, nasa contract, no, me dear me kwami say, see our no contract, Emma road contractor. Emi wakwana, omo musika na ye. Uya, na bina babe access yare. Road Ministry no matter check who say BBI intact answer ne piauka.
Director, in this case, Road Minister Chrem say the last time Obi expose $29 million Indian contractor say okoya ba omie krom kwan walwalia wanya this kind of kono. Road Minister Chrem ne say e she contract nim asenso gwachim contract ya omene road contract ne sign ye no. E she mu say Yamano $29 million no. Na omuvu ne niema ene ne materials nyina kwa site ya. E was yesama ni sika foforo. Ya ntimi ama ni sika foforo within time na was yedema no na $29 million loading ka je no. Ashim wafa. Enu nti na Indian contractor no. Oye bold enough or the $29 million no ko India o mabim no. Na director, sorry to say, why na adwin ye adwuma. Ye contractor e ko pan so. Na obeka kire ne say enei me ma $29 million. Fa move wo niema kwa site. Odi move niema kwa site here. Na sama usika biem wa bra ni panin hye adwuma se. Why na adwin ye adwuma be say contract. Director, but MPs no, they sat in Parliament. Oman question road minister. Oman nya the jam ye biem. Am ye nhu de wo. Including road committee na NDC MPs ni bi so that committee ni so no omo so sabi adwene ni sha because say you sign contract wa bra ni president mama ba no say contractor ansan ye be yi one city di ama no ade say wa pe usika e dia prepare site ho e di wo materials ne o cars nyina kugu site ho a e be say ampa obi bia wa ha wo be start adwuma enti ade sika ne ma pe na je say workmanship what start adwuma the right say wo ye dru face bia ansan ye mo second payment. But under MPP there no first payment here say ye mom di sika ne ma no dey aton niema e dey prepare side but why na be can say na che say contractor no oni one cedi and one say ye free wa na atam sika dey amount na wo say dey share contract no say ye fail to give contractor ni sika that is second payment after say wa site ya sika ne din kadman on fanko $29 million contractor di ko India
ya danso ne na egu abonten
and people are okay among for adwum say with this a normal yanyintum so esi awie and they am one say NPP MPs ne team minority side ho minister ne kan no omo say omo ye mahye omo they didn't know say process wey as a contract ya under their government na omo sensan now the saddest aspect is say ye to mobile phones e dey ma contractors don't have any see here contract any mobile phone there e fa ho bai say ye ma road contract ye kwan ma ye na road minister timi contractor na proposal sa clauses wey na road minister na approve na finance minister Kenoforiata wa hwe contract wem agiatum na wa sanhye yisika na de ma road minister na ye twia ye nto mobile phones emfama contractors na el site na phones na ya san atwa mo ensi wo phones na omu use no e ka omu bo ho no ye ni ye san bo mu sika to cover all those expenses. Director say obi ye we na at the end of the day we are calling for Attorney General any yen judicial service they say they shouldn't joke omu fan same way a serious matter na yen tim krofo nguma obi ti ba bi o say mum pe MPP for asem obi ti ba bi o say e ye otan na mo time penfo bi director otan ne de say bi say your company no bi private company obey say we but I keep on saying say one major akonfa Ghana for share ye and say ye jitu mu say na narodan kwakufado onko second term adana amam for started to nyom for more for nana to aso no that is the day ye de ahoma share ye kon na started say ye mia ye kon but when e be sad we it is very sad but esia wie de ye be pen say enei the right Attorney General man ho nya ha na investigation shase
quick one Felix Ofosu kwache adi nkomo quick one enya botre na iye ntensem no
there's nothing to be concerned about. A woman said there have been a number of individuals among them only partisan. Much charging after we but mostly it has been MPP propagandists. Faso, attempting to seek vindication where there is none. Even Mukra has gone as far as saying Yenepa or Mampeni Akufo-Addo check because we spoke against his ostentatious use of expensive private jets for travels. But say one part, the head before the another so much and say Ghana for any when you say or Mampeni Mama Wafa when this person or say a car or minor bo or Mampeni you may be or tissue. So they are essentially upset. Almost a fool. Say President Mama a save you cost in his travels. Obi Asembe Naba. Abraham and Penny Mama they year president due in January 2025. Now over 1 or 2 travels so ye. Into Obisa Ghana Srafwa a share of Mampeni Ariam Shenso, a form of communication squadron of the Air Force. Say or Mampeni Ariam Sheno and one so much to say. And I'm much of them say Sabra no more Casanidi na Etiapa, it's me. It's you be or Mampeni at the Ariam Shenu to Quine Echo Tanzania, Kenya, and Angola. Many in the course were sat in the plane. This will be around February of 2025. March, Pepe, and a Channel, a journal. So it had to be taken to France. 8 months. Because I'm more Pepe, not another 40p. I'm more Pepe, not another 40p. In between 8 months, no, I'm penny Mama to find. No, who can send or rent a private jet, but one yes, or the air jata old jet, no, and a coin. And a da jata jet, no, not a commercial. Because there was an instance, because I said, what will be concerned?
Yes.
So the commercial flight usage, was inconvenient because he had to lay over in Dubai for some time.
Yes.
Because we had a conversation around it.
Yes.
Norman Penny won kind of Tam Ghana Fusika. $18,000 and now President Akufo-Addo and the rented presidential jets and our private jets, no, the two kind. But one yes, sir, he endured the inconvenience of commercial airlines. And at that commercial airline, any practical no, or you soon need a jetta, yen rent. Starting when they can now, people propaganda is big claim say and you meanwhile, they don't show you any evidence to the contrary. So, Mampeni use jata jet now. He doesn't pay for rental. And you fool. In fact, the initial ones, so they're not on top fuel. The first ones who use it as president, he was not buying fuel. It's and now, or mine is okay. Say, Obiado me after me and data. You better fuel. And there be a landing rights. And 1 or 2 incidental charges. A minimal charges. But so we rent here, you will pay for the rental out of fuel. It's your landing rights, fees, and all the incidental costs that come with it. Into my penny say, look, maybe you are mine now, you will see how. And you know, the na would you manage once a member and Ghana for the donor capacity and main I will do it differently to ensure say the save cost. It's a woman and as I August 6th, disaster is seen. In fact, before then, now Air Force, how many other units within the army, and then National Security Council, and a cabinet. Omoka say we here say you better if you share what the Air Force. Omoka for helicopters be one sem. And Omoka say for a year presidential jet communication squadron management. The also see and because of frequent breakdown. Tawopa one son Kaisan say to me say 8 months na fe na aba. And now say the BIA call repair near but no one was slow to maintain. After so and reliable won't be fin 2.10 and for we need to say the could do assign the waba. And then there are safety issues because of the frequent breakdowns. In the almost to say it is more cost effective to buy a new one. So that in the long run no and no will guarantee operational efficiency. Maybe I will hear be on Sabeka because I have there are improvements on the technology a bit with your mampenia ko baby aba. Tawanya is another commercial, it has its inconveniences, and then local rent here, it is far more expensive than your mampeni akufado yeno. And a cabinet G2, yeah, they call parliament, it was debated. For the avoidance of that, minority did not oppose the purchase of the presidential jet, and I would be.
Yes.
They argued the debate, many debates maybe, but they did not vote against the purchase of the presidential jet. It is a matter of record because they were convinced about the merits of the purchase of the presidential jet. But presidential jet, said the idea a workshop I will cotton and said cotton is too maba. It must be built from scratch. It don't go so aye or more. In Tia say Nyame ya adome bia ento ase afinko na wiye ana ase afifo ebesimo no asase no yensa beka emse nanse ya no mo de first helicopter buy Air Force for receiving ya omudi omudwuma. But in between time ta plane beba enye no e so man peni to kwan it was say on pese obetam Ghana Fusika e dia ko rent jet ne bo odene when we have several competing needs. If he will use an option that is much cheaper. If you need me, I will jet. Obi any Ibrahim, Sergeant no share last 2024. Not Mampeni. In fact, in opposition, no Mampeni use Jata jet to do his external travels, sometimes internal travels. If any other for Obi nim, I must say, Sergeant me available there. Let me use it and avoid the cost. I was raw. Many who said may care. It is a mampeni. I do not want to burden the people of Ghana with excessive cost. But now I need the Washington. But this is a binomoka conflict of interest. Obi, is the end before. What can say in the deep recesses of their libido, because of in the year na Bemunti. Almost finance minister, Kelofoyata, and awarding the whole contract. Bodies or receiving about 150 million Ghana cedis in payment for data bank. And they are desperate for equalization. And where none exists, almost there is. The only way there will be conflict of interest, let's say man penny mama, why rent just maybe Ibrahim mama for. Because to allege conflict of interest, you must state the interest that conflicts. Where is the conflict? Or man penny per jet, now or the Ghana is or rent it. Na ebi wo ho na otam scan the command in near rent the jet, and that is where there is conflict of interest. The interest is the state's payment for a jet, and the fact that NIPA or render service no or maintaining your interest will move because you wish you near. But in this instance, Nimia at the jet na fem no obi. Tell me minister meboa. Nti ye man official car, and a man official car po. Na anopa me so na me ko adwuma na me tu na enye so. Na me tu minua ka e de ko edwuma bone a e de bebre aban ana o ha we won de won no ene de won ka tell me obi.
Yeah, but would that not be a simplistic way of looking at the issue?
No, that's but the same thing. O man tani tu kwan ohia jet minua wo bi na wa fam e de ko te otam na sika to person rent jet. And I mean, I said, media and rent to the rentier. That is where there's an issue. Now, said you, or my ben as a man penny, ya, a bebwama or my name waka, or better a mempe. Or man penny mama, stays or war position, and no say Ghana for say. Or no, ya, or man penny, I go for the entry day, ya, no more book a boo Ghana for there was a year. By the third quarter of the year, I think 2018 or so. Now, Mampeni Akufo-Addo, now going to Nkwano, it had cost the taxpayer 68 million Ghana cedis. Just first 3 quarters of the year. And see, Mampeni Mama say, we must avoid that. If there are alternative ways, a work for my bit medium Makwaba Jojoa, I will exploit. In fact, was also INA which testifies to the fact that he wants to reduce the cost to the state in terms of Mampeni Amemu any abandon here. Was there not a time in this country now you were 123 ministers and the President Akufo-Addo? Mama Shebo so be 60 and now you were 58. presidential staff list, presidential staffer. Na any woman penny Juma, a woman penny Ashie, and the President Akufo-Addo. Around 2018, this time, now almost 361 will be in addition to 123 ministers. Woman penny Mama, and I'm saying the coming days, not the list, never call Parliament. Was successful by about 130. Obi, me appointed me first, no, I am mammy appointment letter, no. Now appointment letter, I show me say, Yabamami, fuel, now watching the Omantoni Mama, despite that provision in my appointment letter, no, was a pen, you chum. You move be anywhere, your jet fuel 50 no ho. Ya, you pay your fuel. DSCDC were cancelled. And in fact, even travels of ministers, any CEOs, in the end, now what you are day, whereby I say, or remind the board members that they are not entitled to travel without recourse to permission from chief of staff. Wa ban first class travel. Or see minister be anywhere which may travel first class. Abino, Edinimu, and also the money to first class. You are restricted to business class. Who you see you are restricted to economic class. I just be a wild Usikana air. So he has done all of this to demonstrate. So unlike the MPP, let's say here, Ayo Mode. I know to Roman Penny Akufo-Addo tam $18,000 an hour current high-end presidential jets, no, and private jets for travels, no. On yes, said. You see, about the saying, and I entered before. It means solid. Said they have been vindicated. Yemepa chow na yaye bibi ebi mada.
Okay, Felix.
Some of it they say
yes.
To tell me, say a president who is working to reduce the cost to the taxpayer, is simply not tenable. And you know credit.
Felix, two questions. First one, on the status of the presidential jet na yenim say say President Mahama eba the first few months what they call Tanzania now what flight needs to be eba na it develop a fault. One of the concerns and as issues among for raising and it's just 5 months prior we were told said that presidential jet was in pristine condition. How could such a jet develop a fault acquire really beyond repair? What's he saying? Ekokot of Ranase, President Barry rely on private. I know your first point. Yeah, no anomaly. Yes.
All right, Martin.
Yeah, no anomaly enough for me Musa the next.
Okay. 4 months prior, no. When you say President Akufo-Addo the sergeant number upon we are President upon we of Liberia, I'm only too kind. If it was not in pristine condition at the time, President upon we are a whole president of the country, would be too kind. But yes, I didn't know, and no mum far private jet 82 coin. So he gave the presidential jet out to another president to travel, and then took $18,000 an hour to rent a private jet to travel. If people criticize Sadiana, they almost did. Say, and if the plane was fit for purpose, not a ne, it is not fit for purpose. And it is a machine; it can break down at any time. And now, in fact, the reporter. Air Force what the black cabinet. In their own words, almost it is an aging aircraft. It can break down periodically. In fact, go back to January 2025. January 2025, Dominic Tutu, no, you're defense minister and President Akufo-Addo. Now, almost power just a few days. You know, in Parliament said the aircraft was in pristine condition and it was their own confession and testimony.
Yeah, but they told you then, I remember, sir, it was not okay for long haul flight. But say a short haul within Africa, but you didn't agree with them.
No, but and yet he wasn't taking it on Africa. And it's not even true. It could even go to Europe. Because there was a time I called France. And also from France to Belgium. And I played Akufo-Addo. So it is not true, say, it couldn't go to Europe. Of course, you cannot do a 15-hour flight. A layover.
Asempa FM.
But after the timer, now Dominic will as immediate past defense minister. No, it was in good condition. If it was not in good condition, I think I am going Kenya, Angola, and Tanzania. It's in my head and allow wrongdoers. Nipa ayo mine bonnet. I say o my sika, I sure my sika to come and pretend that they've been vindicated. They have not been vindicated. Nobody can be vindicated for waste. At the same time, I know I'm telling Akufo-Addo, aircraft. We were in the middle of our worst economic crisis. Anama for bre. There's a Ghana Fiscal Service report. I say 8.5 million Ghanaians. That is a quarter of our population. In 2022 to 2023. That was the time I know my penny was renting aircraft at this price. So anybody who condemned him was right to condemn him.
Felix,
that is not how to run the country. For the avoidance of doubt, and rent private aircraft. So you say, we can rent private aircraft at the cost of then you can talk about vindication. But he has not rented one.
Okay.
He has had one for free. And I was really airborne incidental cost to do travels from Ninia.
Okay. But Felix, in the interest
as I play in
yeah.
Or you way of commercial aircraft, in fact, Obi, you are the best witness because you raised the concern about no crime banter on this matter.
That's true. I remember.
Exactly.
I remember. But in the interest of transparency, would you tell the Ghanaian people how much we spend on using the president brother's plane?
Obi.
Catch the Ghana for.
Obi, we are logic. Simple. We rent aircraft. It is more expensive than just fueling an existing aircraft.
Yeah, I know that. But would you tell Ghanaians how much it is?
They are reporting on the budget, sir.
Yes.
They state how much the president's travel costs. And a public information. So they are asking it for mischievous purposes only. Otherwise, 1 + 1 is equal to 2. Say, we rent aircraft. It is certainly more expensive than just fueling it. We know
but what can fueling? What can landing right? Because Ubetria, when the plane is parked on the tarmac, what can incidental cost? I don't know who takes care of.
That is cheaper than rent because we rent here. You still pay for fuel, you still pay for landing rights, you still bear the cost of the pilot.
No. I agree. I'm saying, sir.
It's there's a figure. I am telling you as a matter of certainty. So it will be cheaper. And I'm giving you the logic behind that. We rent here, you pay for renting it. You will pay for fuel. You will pay for landing rights. You will pay incidental costs. If you get the plane for free, you will pay for fuel, landing rights, and incidental costs. So which one will be more expensive?
Yeah, one obviously will be expensive. Sir.
Absolutely.
So, rental now.
Until say anybody can claim. Say it is more expensive to get the aircraft for free, fuel it, and pay incidental costs than renting it and paying for rent, paying for fuel, paying for incidental costs, and other costs like landing rights. So it is a straightforward argument. But as for the accounting for the use of money for presidential travel, it is contained in the budget report. And what you know, on my penny Akufo-Addo, 68 million for 3 quarters, no, at the car, some Ghana. So, and yes, you understand the point I'm making. So let nobody think, say, you there's no basis for that comparison to begin with. Say, you won't even ask that question, not you, I mean. But say, if you are not intended on mischief, it is so straightforward. So you won't even begin to argue. Say, the Omampeni Mama to see a boy and Cassie, they're not President Akufo-Addo. And at the final point, I'm better to say, there are some claiming, say, you sue Ibrahim Mama jet there, then Ibrahim Mama will get a benefit. Obi, Abraham Omampeni Mama, a war position, or you sue Ibrahim jet, no, did he get any benefit? And secondly, Omampeni Mama, does he need Ibrahim Mama to give him the jet before favoring him as his brother, if what people are claiming is even to be agreed upon? Or you need me. So I just will use the jet as a Buano. So some of the claims they are making, they defy logic. But guilt from the condemnation they came under, and nobody will prepare pay equalization. It's not more cancer more. And otherwise, this is very straightforward and clear. And indeed, President Mama deserves commendation for choosing an option that spares us waste. Before, and indeed, before put their waste was not just limited to aircraft. Everything about them was wasteful. $90 million. At the time we have such economic difficulty.
Let me read this short paragraph of an article journalist Manasseh Azuri-Awini Etroye published today, and one of the people publicly criticizing the president traveling with his brother's jet. Or say The guidelines on conflict of interest published by SRAJ identified 3 kinds of conflict of interest: actual, potential, and apparent, into bracket perceived. This means a public official can be found guilty of a conflict of interest even if the conflict is not proven to have occurred. According to SRAJ, an actual conflict of interest occurs when a public officer's private engagement compromises or her judgment or objectivity in the public office. In the context of a potential conflict of interest, the present action may not have put the public officer in a conflict of interest, but it creates the conditions for such a conflict to occur. Here is how the 3rd kind of conflict of interest, apparent or perceived, occurs. Imagine applying for a mining concession or bidding for a government contract, hoping to win. Unfortunately, you lose. But the person whose company wins the deal is the businessman whose private jet the President of the Republic travels on. The ministers who supervise the procurement process are appointed by the President and may have traveled on the private jet owned by the winner of the government contract. Even if this businessman won the contract with a superior bid, would it be wrong to tinker with the perception that the government is simply returning the favor done by the private jet owner? Does this make sense to you, Felix?
First of all, you're a lawyer. You know that you're for conflict of interest.
Sure.
What is it?
When you are part of the decision making, you recuse yourself when
you
such
should declare
a decision.
Your interest.
Yeah, and you declare your interest and you recuse yourself.
No,
if you
and
have
automatically will recuse.
If it becomes necessary, you have to.
No, you declare your interest. Say, your interest. So it is up to those you are taking the decision away to decide whether, despite that, they should go ahead. So
yes.
the cure for conflict of interest.
But you are saying, sir, you declare your interest and you sit in the decision making.
You see, you have far-fetched extrapolations.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes. It is a far-fetched extrapolation. We see you must prove it. The analogy you gave about award of a mining lease.
Yes.
You must prove it. The president's brother at the time of the application did not qualify, and that there was some tinkering. You must prove it. You can't say it merely because, in fact, as for in the recent passport year, there was a finance minister or a president in here. On it, he awarded the thing to himself. You see, he was a finance minister, now also raise bonds. And then he picked his company to advise him to raise the bonds. No, she and the company. It happened under this, in this country, under MPP, those who are making noise now. It happened, what was their response at the time? I said, I know you've been on the mind. The finance minister, or your man, and also raise bonds. One of the book runners was Data Bank. Who, in fact, finance minister went to Parliament. He decided a question. Tell that MP. He decided a question. How much did bond raising cost in terms of payment to the book runners? On one end, figures for the Parliament took up 150 million. That is what Data Bank got for advising their founder and owner on raising bonds. Ibrahim Ama, his business dealings are well known. Oye business and stand and be president. Nipa he owns a whole cement plant, one of the biggest in this country. And I'll be long before his brother became president. Nejet now. Prominent citizens of Ghana, including MPP officials, have used that jet before. If any other when President Mama was an opposition leader or a campaigner, sometimes he needed to travel outside. He used that jet. In fact, before he was sworn in officially, what I said, he did an African tour to fraternize with African heads of states to introduce himself to them. Say, I
remember.
He used the Jaka jet. In fact, at that time, if the state had provided President Mama a means of travel, because at the time he had even become the responsibility of the state, even though he had not been sworn in formally by virtue of the president-elect. But he used the test jet, Ecobuy. So it's not like a new development when he has become president. So, the only way of it may favor and say we're using a jet. Why wouldn't you favor him when he hasn't used his jet.
Yeah,
so
but
a far-fetched extrapolation.
Yeah, but unim say Felix. Even when you read what the Constitution says about conflict of interest, it can say public officers should not place themselves in positions where their personal interest conflict or are likely to conflict, and that's why Scratch breaks it down into 3. Actual conflict where you prove but there is also potential and there is perceived. And the case we are dealing with now, it seems that the perceived and the potential conflict of interest and they are pronounced in this.
But Obi, we cannot proceed on the basis of Obi perception. So because I perceive, say, why you're born, is that what is being alleged? And now, so you can tell them, say, I perceive that Obi so they will condemn you.
Yeah, but the Constitution says, say, if it's likely to create a conflict of interest situation.
What has happened that suggests that Ibrahim Mama will benefit from anything for President Mama? And then you see, Catherine. In fact, play your work to you.
Yes.
So, said just last week, after 4 Babons, they said they financed it. And I'm After, is it a state bank?
No, ABSA is state bank.
It is a ABSA, private bank, facilitating the acquisition of a plane by President Mia, who is a prominent businessman. Has there been any conflict of interest? And I buy my business for Ghana Hano. And then Akoswa, actually he has received any benefit from President Mama since January 2025. I intimate to raise the likelihood of conflict. The problem is that we have a problem as a country.
Which is
the non-availability of a means of travel for the president.
Yes.
The alternative will cost us money. And I said, one case I will notice some time ago, it will create inconvenience and impracticality for the president.
Yes.
Until we have a stopgap measure pending the arrival of a permanent solution in the form of a new presidential aircraft. Now, you get it for use so that you don't incur unnecessary costs. How can anybody say they are unhappy with it? Meanwhile, and Obi, the most important point is say, it is Ghana for and your bomb and bring for renting the jet and
yes.
So it means that Ghanaians are not happy about the rental of expensive jets. Is that not the case? Especially in the middle of economic difficulty. If a president comes and he takes steps to ensure that doesn't happen, why should it raise an issue?
People have questioned the optics and they think the president can rent a jet at a reasonable price but not use his brother's jet.
What about not incurring any cost at all for the state? And I say incurring the most minimal of cost for the state. It does not endanger his security and safety. It doesn't create any problem or crisis for the country.
Felix,
and it's an interim measure. Pending the arrival of
would you make this same argument if we flip the time now? And I've heard people write that say, imagine for a moment say Gabio Treda Kunana a private jet and ne cousin Anado used to during his travels. No, also these same justifications. Would you have made this argument?
Obi, you put that aside. Maybe I say no. Gabio Tredako Bomti. They used to travel with a President Akufo-Addo on official assignments to meet heads of state. In fact, there's a picture of them sitting with the president of Guyana. President need the official conversation about Ghana. Before I'm condemn us at the end. Number 2, Obianim Gabi Abakasemu Kuma. If Gabi had a private jet before President Akufo-Addo became president, now President Akufo-Addo and you be a so. It will not generate any controversy, especially when people know his track record. What will raise eyebrows and they say that we need the means to acquire a private jet. That was what will raise controversy. It's not the analogy say. So, for instance, President Akufo-Addo, for some reason, who say what's not that become the core office? How does that raise an issue for concern? And also, me I'm here. I buy my car. Now me I'm driving the car or officer. What is the problem with it? And I say, from the 2 million car at the Juma at the bar because my car has broken down. How does it harm or hurt the country in any way? If you make a there's potential for conflict of interest because I shouldn't use my brother's car when I'm in a fix. I might need to be a modern mania. Maybe I'm used to know.
Felix,
it is as straightforward as that.
very well. My nasi BBA.